Good evening, everyone. I wanted to welcome you to the virtual open house. We're really glad to see you today. Before we begin, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Erin Senior, and I'm the manager for the Hamilton Community Engagement Team. And I also live in Hamilton. I'm also happy to be your host for tonight. We're excited to have everybody here tonight. I just wanted to let everyone know that we've had over 900 people register for tonight's meeting. So way to go, Hamilton. That's a record breaker for us. Given that, I'm going to take a couple minutes and just wait for folks to join the meeting. I can see that we've got numbers are coming on, so people are registering and jumping on the call right now, which is wonderful. So while we wait, I'll just let you know that we're going to have a great presentation tonight. We've got a really good lineup. We've got some great updates from our project delivery team. We're also going to be hearing from HSR, and we'll have some updates from the community engagement team as well. So I can see that we're doing pretty good actually with people signing on. I'm going to wait just a few more minutes before I give our land acknowledgement. I'll go over our agenda, and then we'll start today. I'll also just let people know that with the meeting today, the hand function, the chat to raise your hand, as well as the chat function won't be working. So as you know, we do have Slido open for folks, and if you have a question, you can pose it there. So now that I see that we have a fair amount of people joined, I think we're going to start with our land acknowledgement. Can we go to the next slide, please? So Metrolinx acknowledges that we connect communities by building and operating transit within the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples, for whom these lands continue to have great importance. Treaties between First Nations and governments cover these lands, and the promises contained in these treaties remain relevant to this day. Metrolinx and its employees are committed to understanding the history of these lands and the continued impacts of colonization, and take responsibility for actions to advance reconciliation. Metrolinx will continue to seek the knowledge, expertise, and experience of Indigenous partners, and commits to doing business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. We'll take a moment for that to sink in. Thanks again. For the next slide. So as you can see, tonight, we will have a 30 to 35-minute presentation where we will review an overview of the LRT. We're going to share some of our recent milestones and how you can stay connected with us. Following the update, we have a 45-minute Q&A session. Now, as I mentioned, we had over 900 people register for tonight's meeting. So my expectation is that we're going to try and get to as many questions as possible, but there may be some that we're unable to get to. On the next slide, I'm going to show you how to submit your questions for the Q&A using Slido. So we can move to the next slide now. All right, folks, for those of you who have never used Slido before, you need to go to slido.com in your Google. You can Google this, and then you're going to enter the code 2624344, and that will bring you into the Slido for this particular virtual open house. You'll see there that people have already been posting their questions. What you can do is have a read through those questions. If you see something that is either to your interest or you're going to post something similar to that, may I suggest that you just upvote it. That way that question will get moved to the top of the priority for the team to actually answer and address. And I can see some of you are able to do that right now, so that's great. If you haven't ever upvoted before, I know I haven't a lot, what you have to do is just go to the right-hand side of the question and hit the like the thumbs up, and then that question moves to the front. So that's the way that I'll know these are the priority questions that you'd like to have the team to address for tonight. When you do submit your question, though, it goes into a queue first. And I'm just going to give you a little reminder. I know everyone's really great, actually, but this is a community meeting, so if there's any profanity, we won't be able to post that as well. What else do we have to say? So I also wanted to let you know that closed captioning is available. So if you'd like, you can go to the meeting controls, select more, then go to languages and speech, and then you can turn on live captions. Just a reminder as well that this meeting is going to be recorded and posted on the website. So if you or a friend want to watch this again, or you have to leave early, don't worry, it'll be on our website. And all of those who have registered for the meeting, we're going to send an email out to you to let you know that the recording is available. And then you can go and watch it again, share it with your friends. And just a quick reminder, folks, that again, the hands up function isn't going to work for this meeting, nor will the chat. We need to have your questions posted through Slido. And again, you can go to slido.com and then enter 2624344. And I just ask that you have a read through the questions that are already there and then upvote the ones that are either near and dear to your heart or ones that are closest to what you were going to answer. And that way we'll have more time to be able to address a wide variety of questions at this meeting. So now we've got our housekeeping done, we are going to move on to introduce our presenters. I'm very excited about tonight's panel, as should you be. Tonight, we have a great lineup. We have Danielle Burry, the VP of the Hamilton LRT, and she's going to walk us through the project updates, from the packaging of the strategy to what's beneath the surface. Madeline Blanchette, the Senior Project Manager for the Hamilton LRT, will share with us how we're planning for future major construction. We've got Adam Warren, Senior Manager for Utilities, and he's going to provide us an overview of the early utility works that are currently underway. And I think that's going to be of interest to a lot of people here. We are also lucky to have Nick Chaloux, Manager for Transit Strategic Planning for the City of Hamilton, HSR, and he's going to provide a great update on the Hamilton's most recent transit plan, HSR Next. And he's also going to show us how that's going to integrate into the future LRT. Following this, Kelly Anderson, Senior Manager of the Community Engagement Team for the Hamilton LRT, will speak about the importance of engagement, how we will be updating you throughout the project, and where you can find us this summer. We're also very grateful to have Abdul Sheikh from the City of Hamilton, who is the Director of the Project Office for the LRT, to assist us in answering any city-related questions that might come up tonight. So Danielle, without more further ado, I'm going to pass the presentation on to you to kick it off. Thanks again.
Great, thank you, Erin. And as Erin said, hi everyone, I'm Danielle Burry. I'm the Vice President of the Hamilton LRT project with Metrolinx, and also like Erin, a proud Hamiltonian. So before I get into the project update, I just want to take this opportunity to say that it is an absolute sincere privilege to be able to represent the Hamilton LRT project and the team here as part of the city that a lot of us call home and that I myself call home. At the heart of it, the Hamilton LRT project is really about community, whether it's about connecting our community through transit, revitalizing infrastructure for our community, or promoting and facilitating growth, creating jobs, tackling traffic congestion. This project is about us. This project is about our community. So thank you sincerely for taking the time to be here tonight. Your continued involvement, whether it's through events like these, through thoughts that you share through many different emails or social media platforms we have, through our drop-ins that Kelly will talk about a little bit later at summer events, or even dropping into our community office. Your involvement really helps to create a collective ownership in how we seize this opportunity to build our community through this transit project. Like I said, Hamilton's my home, very proud of that, and it is for so many of the team members dedicated to this project. We're really lucky to be able to bring our collective experiences, not only as professionals, but as part of this community. And so when we look at technical drawings, and we spend a lot of time doing that, I'll say, we don't just see lines on the paper. Those lines jump off and tell a story about how the community is actually going to interact with this project through its various phases. Just for some context, I've been that mom, panicked, rushing to the McMaster Children's Hospital emergency room with my daughters. I was a Westhill High School student, crossing busy Main Street to get pizza for lunch in a not so safe manner. And I'll admit that was probably a lot longer ago than I would like to admit. I'm also currently a commuter dealing with increasing traffic at John and King to get to our office every day. For those who drive at John and King, you know what I'm talking about. And I go to Ticats games. I walk through Gage Park. I shop at International Village or Ottawa Street. This is home. And as we progress through this project, we want to be here and help understand what it is you're going through and help you to navigate the ups and downs of the construction journeys that we're going to be getting through in order to get to that end, in order to get to what is ultimately going to culminate in such a transformational transit system in our community. So with that said, I will jump into what is Hamilton LRT. So thank you for those who are joining us again, who are familiar with the project, but also thank you to those who are new. And so for those who are new, if we can go to the next slide, I'll give an overview of what is the project. So Hamilton LRT is a 14-kilometer, 17-stop light rail transit system. Light rail transit in this form is all at grade at the road level. There's no underground or tunnel component to this project. The stops themselves are also at grade. They're essentially larger open air stops, very similar to some of the enhanced HSR bus shelters that you might have seen crop up along the corridor already. The corridor goes from McMaster in the west to Eastgate in the east, utilizing Main Street West, King Street West in the east, Main Street East, and Queenston Road. The various stops hit important areas in the city, including the growing downtown at King and James, as well as areas related to the stadium where the Ticats play, and Eastgate all the way in the east in terms of where we're seeing additional development. We're also tied into the GO network. Right in the downtown, the LRT line is closely connected to the Hamilton GO Center and West Harbour GO, whether that's through walking or through bus connections, as well as the future Confederation GO station, in which we'll be able to provide bus connections between Eastgate and Confederation GO. The project also includes an operations, maintenance, and storage facility that's located near the intersection of Chatham and Frid in the Innovation District component of the city, as you can see from the box in yellow and green. And there is a track going down Frid Street that connects the main service line to that OMSF. Next slide. So we're at a very exciting point in the development of this project. I'm sure everyone has seen the storied history of getting here, but we're really moving along now in a very exciting way. Back in November, we released a request for qualifications asking for the market to see who was interested in partnering with us to deliver this project. I'm happy to say the market response that we received was very high and very interested and very good. And as a result, we've been able to release a request for proposals on May 21st, 2025 to 4 shortlisted teams. Those shortlisted teams are here on the screen. Applicant leads from Atkins Realis, Dufferin, Canadian Murphy Joint Venture, and ACON. So we are actively working with these teams to ultimately select the preferred partner that we will enter into the next phase of this project with. The contract award at the end of the request for proposal stage is currently planned for early 2026. And at that point, it's when we enter into what's called a development phase, where we get to start to answer a lot of the detailed questions that you have in terms of schedule and design and when we are going to be in front with shovels and diggers in front of your door. Next slide, please. So how are we delivering this project? We're delivering it in a few different packages. The first one is the Advanced Enabling Works package, which is currently underway. It actually started in 2023. We're lucky to have Madeline and Adam here today, who will get into a little bit more details on what some of those enabling works are. But the purpose of this package is to essentially clear the corridor for where LRT will ultimately be, whether that's utilities or doing our due diligence and understanding what's underground or our environmental investigations. All of that work has been ongoing. You may have seen it, you may not have. And although we may not have the major construction underway for our major packages, there has been a lot happening out in the community already. Package 1 is where we are going to deliver the utilities, roads, structures, public realms, sidewalks, all of the components that are around the stops, rails, and systems component of the LRT. One of the reasons we're delivering this as part of a separate package is because of the volume and the complexity of the work. The city of Hamilton is an old city. The corridor is an old corridor. There's a lot of bespoke solutions in terms of how the utilities have been built and the age of the infrastructure that we're dealing with. So this first package of works is the one that we're currently in market for with our request for proposals. This package of works will be followed on by our stops, rails, and systems. There is additional work here to happen to understand when that will occur, when we will be in market, as well as the potential to include other components such as operations and maintenance. Next slide, please. The first package of works that we're doing with regards to civil and utilities is going to be delivered via an alliance model. And this may be new to many people. It was new to me when I first joined the project, and have had the opportunity to really learn about the opportunities and benefits of being able to utilize this contracting method. So without getting into too much contractual jargon, the alliance model is really at its core about working together by utilizing respective strengths of the different team members to achieve results that are best for the project. So what does this mean? This really means that Metrolinx, the city of Hamilton, our other asset owners, whether they're utilities or MTO highways, we all have a seat at the table, and we are collectively and collaboratively making decisions to progress the project. Our contract and design partners we're currently in procurement for have a lot of great experience that we're able to leverage and bring to the table. But through this model, we're able to leverage the experience that we bring to the table. We as Metrolinx, we as the city, we as the community. And through this model, we're able to collectively contribute and adapt to the real world and city-specific conditions that we're working within. I do know there are quite a few questions with regards to the alliance model that we'll talk about later, and so I'm happy to dive into some details a little further on during the question period. Next slide, please. Here is an example of how we've already been out in the community. This is a very complex project, as I said, and a very old corridor. And that actually brings some really interesting components to it, of the fact that we are building in a city where a lot of infrastructure and a lot of things have already occurred. So we've been doing due diligence within the corridor to understand what's beneath the surface. And we found some really interesting things. And by being able to understand what is beneath the surface, that allows us to plan for our works and try and minimize the amount of time we need to be in the field doing construction. So a couple examples here are we've done structural conditions for certain areas such as the McNabb truck tunnel near King and James, understanding, for example, in this case, whether or not that truck tunnel is in a condition or designed and constructed in a way that can support LRT on top. To the right of the slide, you'll see we actually used technology called ground penetrating radar. This allows us to use machines to see what's beneath the surface, and we find some interesting things. This is our OMSF site. For example, if you see in pink and highlighted there, this site actually used to be an old train roundhouse, and some of that infrastructure actually remains underground. These are all pieces of the puzzle and all pieces of information that we're being able to bring forward and understand all of the conditions we'll be working within prior to even getting those shovels in the ground. And with that, I'm happy to hand it over to Madeline, who will go into more information around some of the environmental work that we've been undertaking.
Thanks, Danielle. So right now we are planning for construction, which involves environmental studies that confirm existing conditions and identify any potential impacts that need to be mitigated before demolition and construction activities can begin. So for example, here are some photos of field staff conducting cultural heritage and species at risk surveys. So a cultural heritage survey for a building involves looking at features that may have cultural significance. A common example of this would be significant building features associated with a historic landmark or architectural style. The findings are documented in reports that are completed in accordance with provincial regulations related to cultural heritage. A species at risk survey for a building involves checking for any evidence of bird and bat activity. This includes assessing the size and condition of chimneys to determine if they are suitable habitat for chimney swift birds, and searching for evidence of bat use. If the building has potentially suitable habitat for species at risk, targeted surveys will then be completed to confirm if the protected species are using the building. Another example of environmental fieldwork can be seen in the photo of an archaeological excavation on a grass patch in front of Memorial School. So this was a stage 4 archaeological assessment completed last summer to understand what features or artifacts were present below ground. This needed to happen before any subsurface utility relocations could be done, because previous studies indicated that there may be archaeological potential at this specific location. So in terms of the findings, no human remains were found, but there were thousands of artifacts that date back to the 19th and 20th century European settlements. So these artifacts included a lot of old coins and pieces of dishware from homesteads of that time. All artifacts were retained, washed, and cataloged as part of the archaeological assessment. It's important to note that an archaeological assessment to this level is not typical of a heavily developed corridor like this one. So it was really interesting work to observe and be a part of. Next slide, please. The species shown here are examples of local species at risk that may be observed during field studies. So the first one here is little brown Myotis bat. This bat is listed as endangered on the Species at Risk in Ontario list and is protected under the Provincial Endangered Species Act. Mitigations for this species would include avoiding impacts to their habitat during the active season and potential habitat compensation. The next image here is a butternut tree, which is also listed as endangered and is protected under the Endangered Species Act. The first line of mitigation would be to avoid impacts to these trees where possible. However, if there will be any injury or removal to these trees, we follow regulatory and permitting requirements for compensation, which could involve replacement plantings of butternut saplings. Metrolinx also has a detailed vegetation guideline, which addresses compensation for all tree removals. And lastly here, we have the chimney swift bird, which is listed as threatened and protected under the Endangered Species Act and the Migratory Birds Convention Act. Chimney swifts are found in urban areas where there are suitable chimneys that they can use for nesting and roosting. During a targeted species at risk survey, we found chimney swifts for using the chimney of a building along the corridor. A compensation habitat was built at the corner of King Street East and Sturton Street to mitigate habitat loss for this species. It was carefully designed with similar interior dimensions and building materials as the original chimney, so to attract the species for nesting and roosting. The compensation habitat was built a couple of months ago and is currently being monitored for chimney swift nesting and roosting in accordance with regulatory requirements. And now I will pass it over to Adam.
Thank you, Madeline. Let's take some time to talk about the utility work required to build an LRT and highlight some of the utility work already underway. So first off, why do we need to relocate utilities? Before we can build the guideway, the track structure the LRT trains will run on, we need to create a clear and safe space to construct it. That means moving existing utilities like water, sewer, hydro, and others out of the way. By doing this, we create what we call a utility-free zone beneath and beside the future tracks. This not only helps during construction of the guideway, but also keeps the LRT running smoothly if a utility company in the future needs to fix or maintain their infrastructure. Some of these utility relocations are already well underway. If you live near the corridor, you may have noticed this work happening in your neighborhood. These early activities are called utility enabling works, and they serve two main purposes. The first is prioritizing off-corridor utility work. Sometimes it's necessary to move utilities off-corridor to create the space for LRT. We prioritize this work as it helps us minimize future disruptions to the public by keeping construction activities focused within the corridor once full construction starts. The second purpose is relocating some critical utility infrastructure. Two great examples of this are the oil pipeline located at the Queenston Circle and the City of Hamilton's large diameter water main located on Queenston Road. These two examples are big, complex moves that had to happen early so we can stay on schedule. Next slide. The map that you see on your screen shows some active and completed enabling works on and near the LRT corridor. The areas shown in blue represent water main relocations completed by the City of Hamilton, located on Sherman and Wentworth, while the areas shown in red indicate Electra utility work. Electra is almost complete in the Mary and Catherine Street area, which involved installing new hydro poles and underground conduits, while some work is still ongoing, so you still may see Electra crews out on site. We also have a planned project crossing the 403 to deliver a stable power source to the future operations, maintenance, and storage facility for the LRT, along with up-and-coming bell relocations planned at Ray and Hess, shown in orange. Next slide. Most notably on this map, we have many planned and ongoing construction projects with Electra to relocate hydro poles in and around the Vineland Avenue, Dundurn Road, and Maple Avenue area. We have just completed a project on Vineland Avenue, and we are just about to start a second construction project on Dunsmuir and the neighboring streets between Ottawa and Kenilworth. With the City of Hamilton, they have an active water main project on Main Street and Rosewood to relocate the large water main I mentioned on the previous slide. And we have 2 more planned projects located at the intersections of Ottawa and Main and Nash and Queenston. We also have our first planned Enbridge relocation, relocating a vital gas main crossing the intersection of Queenston and Rosewood. As always, for those who are close to the construction, you'll receive a notice 2 to 3 weeks prior to the start of construction that will give you a brief scope and location of the work, along with contact information if you have any questions. And now I'll pass it on to Nick from Hamilton Transit.
Hello, folks. Nick Schlew, Manager of Transit Strategic Planning for HSR. Very pleased to be here and to share some details on our upcoming network redesign that is supporting the LRT project. If we can go to the next slide, a number of folks on this call may have heard of the re-envision process that was underway over the last few years, and all the way back to 2014 with the first rail-ready network redesign. We are bringing that network forward to Council in the next few weeks as HSR Next, our plan to completely revamp our network. The current system that we run has been in place for about 150 years. So this is a major transformation of how we move around the city, and it's designed in a way to make it easier for you to choose transit. There's 3 kind of big moves that we're making with this that I'll point out on this map. We're still introducing the blast routes that folks might remember, and we're actually adding another one. So right now we're calling it Blast X. We're also introducing new hierarchy of service with high frequency, faster routes into and around Hamilton. And we're adding on-demand zones like the My Ride zone in Waterdown, in Stony Creek, Ancaster, Dundas, and beyond. Next slide. So just to give a bit of a sense of what that change looks like, our 2 networks are on the screen here. Today's network is on the left, and it's probably a little hard to see on a small screen, but our service is really oriented right now around bringing people to downtown and mostly from east and west. With the LRT coming in, we are shifting to the network on the right, which is adding a number of things to make that connection easier. We go to the next slide. Our current model is really based on hub and spoke. So everything goes into downtown. If you are a student out in Heritage Green trying to get to McMaster University, you are going to have to transfer at least once to cut through downtown. There aren't really direct options for that trip. And that type of situation is true for a lot of our suburban communities. It isn't really feasible to go directly between them. If we go to the next slide, with our new network, what we are building is a hub-to-hub system. So rather than everything going into Frank A. Cook downtown, we will have new hubs introduced across the city and direct routes connecting each of them. These hubs are going to be located in places where we already work, live, shop, go to school, major destinations for Hamiltonians. So we're really trying to match it to how people want to travel and are traveling. Next slide. Specifically to LRT, and I've noticed some questions coming in on how we're going to connect and build to the other regional transit. We will have service at every LRT stop along the corridor. As we're building that new network, we are making sure that you can connect to this new high capacity, high frequency route through the downtown core and making lots of opportunities to do that. At the same time, we're also building up connections to GO trains. So at West Harbour, Hamilton GO, and soon Confederation GO, we will be adding new routes, bringing folks straight there. And we're actually introducing a new standard that anywhere in our urban transit service area, you will be able to get to a GO station within 1 transfer. Next slide, and my last slide with us. We will be bringing more details to the community in the next few weeks. We're expecting to be before council shortly. and we're anticipating a start in September of next year with some of these changes starting to come through. Because this is a massive network transformation, completely changing each route, it is going to be gradual over time. We will introduce changes each year for the next few years, and we will be out on your bus, online, in your community to try and share what that means for your trips today and the trips you might want to take tomorrow. I will share, just to close this out, keep an eye out at hamilton.ca/HSR next. The site is not live yet, but once we go to council, you will see that site go live and you'll see a lot more materials on how your commute is changing and how transit can work better for you. On that note, I will pass it off to Kelly. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Nick. So I'm going to talk a little bit about communications and engagement, which is going to be very critical as we deliver this project. That's why we're here tonight. We want to make sure the community has access to the latest information as we get it, and this will continue over the course of the project. I wanted to share just a little bit about the role that we play in community engagement, both on this project and within our neighborhoods. It's a bit of a theme tonight, but our engagement team is all very local to Hamilton as well. We have a very vested interest in supporting our community through every phase of this project. Our goal is really to foster open two-way conversations with the community, with elected officials, residents, and the business community. You can find us at events big and small, from open streets to Supercrawl to local farmers markets. We also visit local schools through our Transit in Your Community program, where we speak with grade 5 students about government, what Metrolinx does, sustainability, and how the LRT will operate in Hamilton. And when there's construction work happening in a neighborhood, right now we're in that early works phase, we do provide advance notice to adjacent residents. We hand deliver the notices, outline the nature of the work and any impacts they can expect, as well as our contact information. Some of you may know we also have a community office right in the heart of the downtown. It's near Gore Park between Catherine and John Streets in the Royal Connaught building. Currently, we're open Tuesdays and Thursdays, but our hours are going to expand as the project moves forward. You can always contact us to make an appointment as well. This is just one of many ways that we engage the community. We are out and about connecting with people where they are as well. It's really important that we hear from a diverse range of voices. So as I mentioned, as the project continues to evolve and we get more information to share, particularly, I know everybody's interested in construction timing and phasing and all of those details, which we don't have just yet, but there are going to be many different channels that we'll be using to get that information out to you when we have it, including open houses like this one, in-person open houses, door-to-door canvassing, social media updates, and we'll be establishing construction liaison committees as well as we get closer to major construction. And while you can find us out in the community in many different places, if that doesn't work for you, you can also just email us or call us directly at any time. We'd love to connect. Next slide, please. So this is a list of the events that we've got established for the summer and fall. We hope to see you there. We'll continue adding to these as we confirm more events, but you can find this on our website as well and on social media. And that wraps it up for me. I'm going to pass it over to Erin.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, team, for providing an update to those of us who are attending the meeting. So I wanted to just start us off. We're going to be starting the Q&A session. I think I've said that we've got about 45 minutes to address questions that are posted through Slido. For those of you that haven't gone to Slido yet, I just suggest go to slido.com and then you can add in the code 2624344. That's where you can have a look at the questions that have already been posted. I've seen that people are getting pretty familiar with it right now. We're upvoting certain questions. Again, have a look through questions. If there's something that's similar to what you want to find out a little bit more about or that you're interested in, then that's an opportunity to click the thumbs up on the right-hand side of the question and it will upvote it. And I'm going to be going through the questions in priority. Before we start though with questions, Danielle, I'm just wondering if we could we can do a little bit of clarification. I think there was something that we just misspoke a little bit about, and it was just regarding the lack of tunnels. So if you just want to speak to that quickly, and then I'm going to start going through the questions that we have, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So just for clarification, getting into technical jargon again, we don't have tunnels, but we do have an underpass. And where that is a location where the LRT tracks does go under the CP tracks on King Street East between Gage and the Delta. So it's not a tunnel in that it's completely underground and you won't see it. It is open air. You'll be able to see the tracks, seeing it operating, but there is a component where the CP rail will be on top of the LRT tracks.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying that. And also, folks, just again, the raise your hand function actually doesn't work for this meeting, nor does the chat. So if you can go to Slido, post your questions in there. You can upvote what you'd like. Then I'll start to address those to the team. One little thing, if there's anything specific, like a property address or a very specific question related to something that you're interested in learning about at the LRT, I would suggest that you email us directly at hamilton@metrolinx.com. You can also get our phone number off the website as well. You can just Google Metrolinx Hamilton and that information is available. And that way we could address something that's a little bit more specific or personal that we can't really talk about here on our call today. So with that, I'm going to go to our Slido and have a look and see what we've got. Danielle, we've got one of our favorite questions. And I think this is the one that we do hear often. It's not a surprise. And I think I'm just going to start the event with this. We've done a little bit of the project updates, but maybe we can get into the phasing a little bit more and some timing. The question is, when is construction going to begin? That's our top question for today.
Absolutely. So as I said, currently we're in market for a request for proposals to select our partner. Once that partner comes on board, we sign an agreement with them to enter into what's called a development phase. That development phase is where we're able to work with our partners to go through detailed design and detailed schedule and basically all of the details associated with the project. That development phase takes approximately 18 to 24 months. It depends on doing our analysis in terms of risk and design work and all of our approaches in terms of how we want to deliver this project. But generally speaking, the rule of thumb is 18 to 24 months. Construction will begin following that development phase. Now, construction will not be in all of the areas of the 14 kilometers all at once. So I do know we get a lot of questions, particularly from those who own businesses or live on the corridor or go to school on the corridor in terms of when are you going to be constructing in front of where I work, live, play. That is information we will develop with our partners through the development phase. It will be done in segments, and it won't necessarily be done from west to east or east to west. It'll be done based on those areas that have greatest complexity and greatest impact on the overall schedule, as well as other considerations in terms of how do we connect in with other city capital works? How do we connect in with utilities in terms of from point A to point B? How does a water main service the neighborhood? So there's a lot of detail that goes into what that construction schedule will ultimately look like. So long story short, major construction for the first package of works is going to follow the development phase. However, when we are in each segment, that is information we will share as soon as we know it with the community as we develop the construction schedule. With that said, there is construction happening, as we talked about today, in terms of our Enabling Works program, obviously on a bit of a smaller scale, but hopefully you see that there is activity happening within the corridor and will continue to happen within the corridor during that development phase. And all of that is important work to pave the way for that major construction to start.
That's great. Thanks very much. I'm going to move on to our second question that has been upvoted, which I think is something we give a lot of thought to on the team. Matt G wrote in and said, considering recent Metrolinx projects in the GTHA, are there any lessons learned, problem solved that may benefit the construction of the Hamilton LRT? Fantastic question. Danielle, I'm going to pass it over to you. And then if you want to invite anyone else to contribute to that, please go for it.
Absolutely. So we could do a whole town hall and probably a whole day town hall on the lessons we've learned from other projects. And that's one of the great benefits of having those other projects come before us is we get to learn those lessons. I won't be able to go through all of them. We have a log longer than if I printed it out, longer than our office floor, I'm sure. But some of the key ones I will highlight. So the selection of the alliance model and how we're contracting this project is one of the lessons learned that we've been able to take away. As I said, the utility component and the characteristics of the Hamilton corridor, it's very narrow, it's very old infrastructure, provides a lot of complexity and risk. And on some of those other projects, whether we're thinking Eglinton Crosstown or Finch West or here Ontario, Hazel McCallion line, I should say, they use models that a lot of the decisions in terms of design, cost, and schedule happen early on in the process based on early information in terms of due diligence and design. The alliance model allows us, before entering into full implementation phases, to be able to take that design further, to take that construction and schedule further, to do more due diligence in the corridor and really understand what it is we're getting into in advance. And it allows everyone to be at the table as opposed to passing things off to a contractor designer. It allows us to bring our expertise. So for example, there's a lot of city water main work. It's already been ongoing, being delivered by the city. Who better to help design and understand the water main network within the city than Hamilton Water? So it allows us to utilize that expertise based on the contractual model. Another lesson that we've learned is in terms of how we deliver it in the packages. And so we talked about how there's multiple different packages of work. It allows for us to engage with contractors and designers and team members and asset owners based on their expertise. So on some of these larger projects, you have a lot of different disciplines coming together, which is great, but there's also something to be said around being able to focus on what you're really good at. So by taking the utilities and the civil component earlier on, taking a lot of that risk, it clears the path for that stops, rails, and systems package to come from forward from that. Those are a couple of the key lessons learned at a very macro level in terms of just how we deliver this project. We're also learning a lot around safety and how we work with our community during construction, not only on disruption, but on safety. A lot of things in terms of things like haul routes. Where are trucks traveling throughout the city to get to the corridor? How are we protecting for pedestrian movements through the site? How do we challenge ourselves to make sure that the community that we're building this for are safe while we're constructing it before we get there? And so those are some key learnings as well that we're able to take away. I wish I could talk more, but
I know.
we have a short amount of time and a lot of questions.
Absolutely. Excellent. I do see that we have a second question just regarding when will the project be completed and available for use? So I think Danielle provided that update saying that after we've got our project partners on board, we're going to be able to have that detailed schedule. And so at this time, we actually don't have a date that we can share with you right now. So again, as that becomes available, it's our commitment to share that with you. I know that's a priority for a lot of folks, just to get a sense of like, when is this project actually going to be coming? So as soon as we know, we will also let you know. I'm going to move on to the next question right now. It's a comment, but I also think it's something I'm going to pose to you, Danielle, and get your thoughts on it. So someone has wrote in saying, any thoughts into making the trams a more vibrant color than gray? I'm thinking of how the red TTC streetcars have become an icon. The LRT is a great way to bring more color to our city. I would propose yellow and blue to match the colors of the city's flag. Thank you. So maybe just reflect on that. Maybe we can provide a little bit of info there.
I absolutely love this question. I don't have a good answer to it, but I love the question. I will say in terms of our vehicles, we have not yet selected our vehicle, and there would be lots of different stakeholders in terms of making that decision of what color it would be, both at the Metrolinx and all of our internal departments, as well as the city of Hamilton. So there's a lot of factors that will feed into whether or not we can choose a different color. I will say we're not TTC operated, obviously, being in the city of Hamilton. So we're not necessarily tied to decisions made by TTC. So it's something that I think is good for us to keep on our radar. Just, we have fun discussions in the office, as you know, Erin. Some people want it yellow and black for tie cats.
Yes, I do know this.
Yeah, and we get a lot of questions too on around the name of the system, and we all have our own ideas on what that could be. So those are definitely things that we will address. We're a little early on in the process to be able to say definitively what we do, but it's definitely something on our radar.
That's great. My daughter will be happy to hear that as well. So we're going on to the next question that's been upvoted, and I think that's something between Danielle and Nick that we're going to address. The question is, how does the LRT connect to GO train services? Danielle, why don't you take that, and then Nick, if you want to add anything onto that, I think that would be helpful as well.
Absolutely. So I think we addressed it a little bit, but there are 3 GO stations within the lower city of Hamilton. So there's West Harbour GO on James North. That one, the closest stop connection would be the James Street stop. There would be a couple of ways to access it. If you are up for walking, it's about a 10 to 15 minute walk, depending how quickly you walk. And I'll let Nick talk about any potential transit connections there. We also have the Hamilton GO Center. That, again, the closest stop would be the James Street stop, approximately a 10-minute walk. And then Confederation GO is a little bit further away. The closest stop there would be our Terminus Eastgate stop, and that one would rely on HSR. So with that, I will hand it over to Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
And thank you both. So it's important to note this will be our future network. So I'm answering this question from the mindset of what service will be in place when the LRT is ready to go. With that new network, we are adding a lot of service to make those connections. Right now, most of our routes come into Frank A. Cook. A lot of those routes will be extended down to West Harbour. We'll actually have, I believe it's 11 routes traveling kind of through that corridor. So you'll have lots of options to make the connection between LRT and West Harbour and Hamilton GO. On the Confederation side, we will have service running between Eastgate and Confederation GO, multiple services. One of our blast lines will be making that connection, as well as local service. And I would be remiss to say there will also be the existing micro-mobility options in Hamilton that can help out too. So be bike share and our Lime scooters, or Bird scooters, sorry.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Nick and Danielle. This one we also like. We get this question at our pop-ups often as well. Danielle, I'm going to send it over to you. And then if there's anyone else we want to talk about, we can do that. So will the LRT get signal priority?
All right, short answer, yes. Long answer, there are many different types of signal priority and how it interacts with the overall traffic signal network within the city. Couple of the key types of signal priority there are. One of it would be called preemption, which is essentially what you see not in the city of Hamilton, but in other cities with emergency vehicles, that as soon as you're close to an intersection, it triggers a green light. There's other type of signal priority where it's overall scheduled and the technology allows for a regular schedule to protect for a green light. But if the train falls behind, there's technology that allows it to catch up and get that green light moving forward. Those decisions on exactly what technology we use and through what intersections it would be available is something that will come through future design. Generally speaking, we would like to implement it throughout the corridor, but there are considerations in terms of what does that do for the overall traffic network within the lower city. And so not only is it part of our design of the traffic signal priority, but also in our traffic modeling and understanding that the corridor we're in is going to be focused on transit and active transportation, and that car traffic is going to go to parallel routes and other roads within the lower city. And we need to make sure that all of the solutions we're bringing forward also interact with the overall traffic network. So yes, there will be, and we'll be excited to share more details on that as the decisions are made in detail in terms of how we will operate.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The next question, I think we've actually addressed occasionally as well, is what kind of frequency for trains will we be able to expect? So just wondering, how often will the trains be running?
So that's a decision that will be made in partnership between Metrolinx and the City of Hamilton. This is part of the overall HSR network. The LRT is one line in an overall network. It is considered a high frequency line. We are looking at likely during peak hours, rush hours, when there's a lot of traffic, likely somewhere in the range of every 6 to 7.5 minutes, in terms of there being a train at every stop. But there is some considerations in terms of the overall ridership demand and capacity, and discussions with the city on our operations and model and concept of operations that we need to land on. But the idea is that it is essentially an on-demand service. It should be a service that is frequent enough that you don't have to look at a schedule and be like, oh no, I missed it, I got to wait another half an hour for a train. That's not the intent. The intent is for short waits, high frequency, but the exact headway is something that is still in discussions between Metrolinx and the city.
Great. So what I hear from you is that we'll have a frequent enough service coming through that we'll be able to not have to wait and check our schedules and walk around. So I think that's wonderful. We had another question just about the alliance model, and I think we've talked about that previously. So I'm just going to go on to the next question here. It's a question about the spur line connecting to West Harbour via James Street. Just wondering if that's being reconsidered at all. I'm wondering, Danielle, if you can speak to that, and maybe that's something that our city friends can also speak to too.
So if I'm reading the question and understanding it correctly, I believe it's referring to a past iteration of the project in which we were building a rapid transit connection between the King Street main line down James Street, either to West Harbour or further down to the harbor. I will say that the current scope of the project we're in procurement for right now does not include that. However, as Nick mentioned, and maybe I can hand it over to him afterwards in terms of the overall HSR network, there has been talks around the blast network. It's probably a term people are familiar with. So that James component is part of the A line of that overall rapid transit blast network. And decisions on what type of technology or the timing in which we would see any type of rapid transit is yet to be determined. So no, the previous iteration where we constructed James Street North as part of it is not part of current scope, but is part of kind of future planning for consideration. And I see Abdul hopped on, so I can either hand it off to Abdul or Nick.
No, thank you. This is Abdul Sheikh, Director, Hamilton LRT Project Office from City of Hamilton. I would like to mention, Daniel, you already mentioned City has in previous iteration completed a blast network, what we call. B is our line B, which is Hamilton LRT corridor. The city's second priority is line A, which is James Street and Upper James Street, which is connecting from Hamilton Waterfront to Hamilton International Airport. So that's the second priority, which I believe City Transportation Planning Group will be initiating a feasibility study to determine what kind of a higher order transit corridor will be recommended for this corridor. So yes, well, there is a blast network, which includes 5 future higher order transit corridor. Line B, which is Hamilton LRT, already under construction soon. And then second priority will be line A, which I already mentioned. So yeah, so City will be working on those 5 higher order transit priority projects soon.
Great, thanks, Abdul. I just want to have a reminder to everyone that if you have a question, feel free to post it in the chat. And then again, sorry, not in the chat, in the Slido, in Slido. And then make sure to just have a read through to see if there's anything else that people have already posted and just upvote that. I'm seeing there's a little bit of changeover. So again, if you have a read through the questions, something is interesting to do, please upvote it, and then we'll be able to pass it to the project team. So Daniel, we've got a question about properties, actually, and that's something that I thought maybe would be good for us to talk about here. Rob wrote, will all properties along the corridor that have been purchased by Metrolinx eventually be sold back to private developers? Just some clarity around that. And then will we be developing any of those properties ourselves? So maybe you can add some clarification to that question.
Absolutely. So there was a significant amount of properties that we needed to acquire. As I said, we're a very narrow old corridor, and in order to fit LRT, it did unfortunately require quite a bit of property acquisition, not uncommon for these types of projects in urban settings. With regards to what happens with that residual property after we use what is needed for the project, that is something that is yet to be determined, and it's something to be determined by government. So we as Metrolinx are an agency of government. Those properties are going to be used throughout the project in terms of construction staging and for actual LRT assets, potentially things like signal cabinets or TPSS sites. So as we go through the design process, we'll have a better understanding of what component of those properties are needed for the project itself, particularly in terms of construction staging. What happens to them afterwards is not something I can answer at this time, and is not something that Metrolinx in and of itself can answer. Again, as an agency of government, that is something that government has the ultimate decision to make there, and there are processes in place in terms of how government utilizes those lands.
Great, thank you very much. So we've got another question just around, is the city, from George, is the city paying any monies for any overruns, or is it 100% funded by the province?
So the LRT project, the capital component of it, so the dollars that we put in to build the project, is a joint funding initiative between both the provincial and federal government. The funding announcement was for 3.4 billion, 1.7 billion from each of the province and federal governments. In terms of the city, the agreement with the city of Hamilton is such that ongoing day-to-day operations and maintenance costs would be funded by the city, because essentially LRT operates as part of the overall transit network within the city. And so it's an ongoing asset that the city essentially integrates into the overall network. The ongoing life cycle, which essentially means the operations and maintenance for the assets that we as Metrolinx own, so is it our vehicles or the rail, in terms of how do we maintain it in kind of good long-term life cycle condition, that is also funded through government at the provincial level. However, maybe I'll hand it over to Abdul if there's anything you'd like to add in terms of the operations and maintenance and the day-to-day funding from the city of Hamilton.
Yeah, no, thank you, Daniel. I think you have very well covered. I think the question asked for any overruns. So if the question is related to the capital cost, so no, city will not. This is a provincial project, and city province will be responsible to build and responsible for capital cost. City may be adding some betterment. We see some of the opportunities while Metrolinx is constructing major construction. For example, if we need to upgrade certain things on top of our Metrolinx base infrastructure going to look like. So we may be adding some additional infrastructure to take benefit of LRT project. That's what we call additional municipal infrastructure. We also call betterment. So those funding could be added on with Metrolinx major construction. In terms of operation and maintenance, as Daniel mentioned, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with province and Metrolinx, calls that city will take on the operation and maintenance except for life cycle. That will be city responsibility, right? So all of these terms needs to be nailed down with Metrolinx, but we have agreed that city will take on operation maintenance except for life cycle. Technically, all of the day-to-day operation of maintenance will be the cost to be borne by city.
And just to get really to the point on that question, overruns, capital costs, if they're related to that, are funded through provincial and federal government, not the city.
Great. Sorry, and I realized that I had prioritized an earlier question, but we're going to go through, we've got enough time so we can go through both of these. So this is sort of building on essentially what that question said. Is there any chance that the city will take advantage of the opportunity to make parts of the downtown Hamilton along the route more pedestrian friendly in concert with the LRT? Danielle, maybe you can take that, and I'm sure the city has some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Short answer, yes. and some of it will be delivered through this project. Abdul can speak around if there are any additional enhancements from the betterment angle that he was talking about in terms of what does the city want to do above and beyond what's part of the project. But as part of the project, we are looking at a lot of key principles. For one, implementing urban braille, for example, for our sidewalks is part of the project from end to end, the full 14 kilometers. We're also working with the city on how we implement their complete streets guideline, looking for opportunities in terms of what we do with street furniture. And so we're looking at those opportunities and implementing them as much as we can. With that said, there is a balance between property acquisition and what we can do in terms of wider sidewalks and wider pedestrian areas and cycling facilities and things like that. So because of the nature of the existing corridor and the buildings there to protect for people's properties, there will be some areas where we are limited in terms of how wide our sidewalks or cycling facilities may be. But the overall intent is to take the city's policies in terms of complete streets and apply it to the greatest extent possible within the constraints that are very real within the corridor. And I can hand it over to Abdul.
Excellent, thanks. Go for it, Abdul.
Thank you, Daniel. I think you have already well covered. So again, like we as a city staff have design themes. The streetscape improvement is one of the important design themes we have when we are reviewing the design, along with safety, along with pedestrian improvement. So there are the themes which we are carefully looking at while we are progressing with the design as well. And I can just mention, some of the improvement what we have already proposed to the city council. For example, International Village, there will be a more, public realm improvements within the International Village. So we are actually recommending to extend that pedestrian environment further west of that area, right? Further west into the downtown. So some of these recommended, which we've already recommended to the council, again, that would be subject to further discussion during the development phase with the alliance partner, how much it's going to cost and those kind of things. But we are already progressing on some of these elements, which we have already recommended to the public through council, that we would like to extend some of these design improvements along the downtown across that stretch. I can provide the more detail, but there are lots of information already available on public website through council.
Right. Again, thank you, Abdul. So let's get on to this question that had come up earlier. So with the alignment change to run along Dundurn, the route now has two very tight turns that will limit vehicle speed and increase travel times. Has Metrolinx considered expropriating some of the adjacent parking lot to allow for faster alignment and more space at Dundurn?
Great. So many people will recall 1 or 2 years ago, I've lost track of time. We made the decision to update and refine our alignment slightly in the area of Main and Dundurn. The previous design included a solution that had an LRT only bridge that connected Main and King. And as referenced in the comment, the current design utilizes the Main Street and Dundurn right-of-way in order to create those connections. So a couple considerations. We did overall runtime modeling in terms of how long does it take for LRT to get from end to end. So when we made that initial decision in terms of refining the alignment, when we did the modeling there was not a large impact as a result of those two 90-degree turns that are being referenced for a couple of reasons. One, the LRT only bridge had quite a few curves on it in it of itself, which impacted speed because of things like the highway and highway ramps and CSO tanks and environmental conditions and property. So it wasn't a straight shoot from Main to King. It was actually operating at slower speeds already on that structure. So the trade-off there was essentially somewhat equal in terms of the modeling that we did. The other key thing in terms of this question is that there is a stop located on Dundurn Street between those two 90-degree turns. And at a stop, you're slowing down to enter into the stop and you're slow coming out of the stop. And those 90-degree turns just happen to be right at the platform. So the impact of those 90-degree turns is somewhat mitigated from the fact that the stop location where it is already required the speeds to reduce in that area.
That's great. Thank you. So this next question is lovely. If this is successful, will there be more LRT projects after this one to connect other parts of the city, such as the mountain?
I hope so. Not my decision, unfortunately, nor anyone really on this call. As we've mentioned before, there are some policy and planning documents in terms of the blast network and understanding how the city grows in its entirety as part of transit network. But there's nothing that I can report on right now in terms of future commitments. All I can say is I hope we do really well and do you proud on this version of the B-line, so that we can prove to the community and our users and how our city grows that this is a worthy investment and has great impact in how our community is building.
Thanks, Danielle. So based on that, let's talk about the stops that we've got. There's a question about, will there be public washrooms at the LRT stops? Maybe you could address that one.
So there will not be. The stops themselves, as I said kind of early on in the presentation, they're not stations. They're not full buildings. They're open air shelters. And if you've seen some of our renderings on our website, and if you haven't, take a look at our website for some of those renderings. They'll give you a good indication of what they look like. Generally speaking, those stops are the length of the train, and depending on the location, are somewhere between 3.5 to 4.5 meters wide. So again, they're very much just shelters. And the reason for that is a few different things. One of them relates back to the question earlier in terms of frequency. How often does the train come? So let's make the assumption that our headway is 6 minutes. If you have a train every 6 minutes, that means the average wait time is 3 minutes. The idea is that you're not actually spending a lot of time at our stops. The service is so frequent that things like using a washroom or a water fountain or other amenities that you would see in a station are not necessarily needed as a result of the high frequency service. We also have constraints, obviously, in terms of the space. This is a very urban system. LRT is intended to integrate with the corridor, integrate with the community, integrate with the landscape. So we try and minimize our footprint as much as possible to protect for that integration into what is there today.
Excellent. Thanks. That was great to cover off two of those questions just about the frequency of the trains coming, then also the amenities that won't be at the stop. Let's go to a little bit more of a contentious question. Will the City of Hamilton be operating the LRT?
So we don't know yet. The decision has not yet been made in terms of who the operator will be. Abdul can speak to recommendations and work that the city has done in terms of what they've presented to Metrolinx as a recommendation. Metrolinx and government are currently reviewing the recommendations from the city to help make that determination. Those conversations will be ongoing with the city as well. But there is also a factor in terms of the second package of works that I mentioned in terms of stops, rails, and systems. We still have some decisions to make in terms of delivery model and schedule. So this decision in terms of the operator will somewhat be related to our decision on how and when we deliver the stops, rails, and systems package as well. But Metrolinx and government have received the recommendation from city staff, and I can hand it over to Abdul to speak about what that recommendation is.
No, thank you, Daniel. As Daniel mentioned, as we all know, Metrolinx owns a project, and according to the MOU, memorandum of understanding we have with Metrolinx and province, Metrolinx will have a final decision on who is going to operate. But in terms of city recommendation, as Daniel mentioned, there was an extensive exercise we did with our city council, with the public involvement as well, which was done in 2023 and 24. And what city recommended to Metrolinx that I can mention that there were 4 different models we were proposing, right? So what we landed on that on day one, city will take on all the public interface elements, which includes communication, customer service, fare enforcement, anything related to the public interface, city should take on the day one when the LRT is operating. And for the first 10 years, what we were recommending that for the first 10 years, all other operation and maintenance activities which are highly technical should be taken by third party under Metrolinx procurement. And what we recommended also after 10 years, the city should take on, like HSR should take on all, including the public interface, along with all operation and maintenance activities. So that's a recommendation which we have passed on to Metrolinx, and we are still waiting for Metrolinx confirmation whether that operation model will be implemented or not, right? So.
Great. Okay, thanks, Abdul. I'm just going to give a shout out here. Someone wrote in, love LRT, build 2. Keep up the great work. Can't wait to ride. And thank you for the 17 of you who voted for that. Very sweet. The next one is, how many can ride at once? And what would be the cost per trip? Maybe Daniel, we can start to answer that first half of that question.
Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that we have not yet selected which vehicle we will be using. The capacity of how much the vehicle can hold in terms of passengers is obviously a big factor in terms of what we select for that vehicle. Also related to that is what standards we use in terms of, again, getting a little bit technical, we call it crush capacity. So you can design a system based on how many people you'll even allow on the train. So like say a train can hold 280 passengers, which is generally the assumption that we were using to answer the question. An assumption is around 280 passengers per train. With that said, does that mean everyone is shoulder to shoulder? How much space do they have to move around? There's different standards that we use in transit planning in terms of what is the acceptable capacity of the vehicle that we're willing to accept from an operational and customer comfort capacity, really. And so whether or not we're designing to the vehicle being, does everyone get a seat? Does everyone get a square meter around them? Those are considerations too, as well as how many people it can hold. But some assumptions we've done in terms of our capacity and ridership modeling and deciding on headways and frequencies and all that is some assumptions around 280 people per vehicle.
Great. And there was just that second part around the cost. And I assume right now we're just not really in a space to be able to talk about that, but maybe you might have a little bit more information to share.
I can talk on it a little bit. So because the city is responsible for operations and maintenance costs, as part of our agreement with the city, they also get fare box revenue, which means that the city will set the fares. If they get the revenue, they get to set the fares. Generally speaking, the conversations we've had with the city is that because LRT is part of the overall transit network, we want to make that as seamless as possible in terms of fares and how you interact and transfer and values. But that will ultimately be a decision by the city and city council in terms of what that will look like. Because of the fact that the city is responsible for those operations and maintenance costs, and that fare box revenue will help offset those costs.
Great. That's fantastic. Thanks again. So we've got another question. Will buses continue to run down King Street, or is it LRT replacing all existing buses along this route? Again,
so I can start. Yeah, I can start,
and then maybe Nick
hand
might
it
want to
over
do it.
to Nick. So at a high level, LRT does reduce the amount of traffic lanes in the corridor. So like on King Street, there's some cases where you have 5 lanes of traffic right now. In the future, you may have only 1 in one direction or 1 in each direction. That has considerations in terms of bus operations and overall traffic, in terms of, does it make sense to operate them on 1 lane of traffic because every time they're stopping, everyone behind them is also stopping. So at a high level, our discussions with HSR have been, 1, this is part of the HSR network, so we don't need to duplicate necessarily the service from end to end. So there's unlikely to be a bus route that goes from Eastgate to Master along the same corridor. Also with those considerations that I said in terms of lane reduction and traffic considerations. But with that said, there is still an important component of how local service will supplement and connect into the LRT corridor, both in terms of stop distance. We strive with our LRT stops to have them within an 800-meter distance of one another, but in some cases, like on Main Street West or Queenston Road, they're a little bit further apart. There's more lanes of traffic that may provide more opportunities to supplement with more local service. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nick.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I lost my mute button. To echo what Danielle is saying, there will be still local service parallel to the corridor. Our network redesign that I've shared will still have local service running along Main and different portions of the route. And we've also redesigned the downtown network specifically to help bring people into LRT. I know there were some other questions on the same kind of theme with ability to walk to the LRT stops, which are further spaced. That's how we're designing the service, to try and make sure there is still a local bus running to bring you to the stops where that gap is growing.
Great. And with that, I just wanted to build on that with the next question from Mark. Maybe Nick, you can continue with this one. Why not save the money and add articulating buses to serve the larger community? Do you think you could speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, because the good news is that we're planning to do this already. We're actually planning to do both. So part of HSR Next, our new transit growth plan, is adding service to these areas. Not necessarily all of them listed, but we're adding service in Ancaster and Waterdown, north of the QEW, service out to 50 Road. In terms of interregional, that kind of goes beyond our scale, but we are adding that bus service to make those parts of our community better connected as well.
I'm going to keep you on the line here, Nick. Again, I just wanted to talk about the connection. Danielle had mentioned it earlier about the spacing between stops on the LRT. And there's a question here just around the King bus route. The LRT does not have the same number of stops as the 1A King bus route. Why? And I think this really gets into accessibility questions. What public transit service is going to serve those in between stops that were eliminated, and or maybe you could speak to HSR's how they'd be helping folks who might need a little bit more help getting to stops.
And maybe I can start actually, Nick, before you get into specifics, just on why the decision was made for the stop spacing that we have for LRT. And generally speaking, it's because it's a rapid transit system. We're trying to be rapid from end to end. And there's a balancing act in terms of making sure stops are at the areas with the highest ridership and potential for people to utilize those stops, while also balancing it with the overall runtime. So if we had to stop every 400 meters, the overall time to get from end to end is increased, which then has an impact on how many people want to use the service. So there's a lot of work we do in balancing the number of stops with the overall runtime. With that said, understanding, some of those larger distances will be difficult for people to walk to. And that's where HSR, whether it's their conventional transit or paratransit, have some options to help people fill some of those gaps in terms of accessibility. So if there's something you want to add to that, Nick.
Just very quickly, I was going to pick up on our accessible transportation services. Obviously, not everyone is eligible for those services, but that is present in the corridor, and we're working with Metrolinx to make sure that if you're a DARTS user currently, that access is maintained through the corridor and that we have the space at the stops to connect you.
Great, thanks very much. So we're going to move on to our next question now. The next question is about Main Street 2A. So what is the planning status of the Main Street 2A conversion west of Dundurn, and how does the LRT alignment affect it? Danielle, do you want to start with that, and then perhaps we can bring the city on for that one?
Absolutely. So with the refinement to our alignment in years past, we are now utilizing Main Street West all the way from Cootes Paradise to Dundurn as part of the alignment. The existing Main Street West between Paradise and Dundurn is currently one way. With the implementation of LRT, the intention is to include the two-way conversion of Main Street between Paradise and Dundurn as part of the LRT project. Therefore, the timing associated with that would be tied into all of the timing we talked about in terms of how we're delivering the LRT project. East of Dundurn, so basically Dundurn to the Delta, I will hand over to Abdul in terms of an update on planning and implementation.
Yeah, no, thank you, Danielle. So in terms of east to Dundurn to Delta, east of Dundurn to all the way to Delta. So this is an approved capital project currently under the design by our public works. And the plan, what I understand, the construction is expected to start in mid 2026, right? So that's what we are currently working on, is an approved capital construction project. Plan to construct in 2000. So in terms of phasing, where it's going to start, again, that would be subject to the recommendation by or the consultant, right? So right now it's currently planned to start construction in 2026.
Okay, thank you. I'm just checking the time right now. We're getting up to 7:50 and we will be closing the meeting at 8 o'clock. I think we've got about 3 questions left. We'll start with that. And if we've got a little bit more time, then we'll address one more. So with that, Danielle, there's a question came in. Will all the below the street services be updated? For example, sewers, water mains, etc. Maybe you could speak to what's actually going on for the first phase of the project.
Sure. So generally speaking, the majority of the existing utilities will be relocated, replaced, or touched in some way from end to end, from McMaster to Eastgate. And I think Adam did a great job earlier of talking about why that is. So we don't want utilities remaining underneath our guideway. Couple of reasons. One, if you have to do ongoing maintenance for it, that impacts the service. And a rapid transit system is really supposed to be reliable. So for any of that ongoing maintenance, we don't want it to impact it. For any replacements, which gets even beyond that ongoing maintenance, it would have an even larger impact in terms of our ability to provide service on the LRT. And because our corridor is so narrow, and I think I have said that a lot, if I say it one more time, I would be able to put a loonie in a jar and pay for the whole project. But our corridor is quite narrow. And as a result, the majority of the utilities will be relocated. As I said, the delivery of the project is in 2 major packages of works, package 1 and package 2, package 1 being civil and utilities. And at a high level, the division of value in terms of infrastructure that there's capital investment being put into it is about a 50-50 split. So there is a significant investment as part of this project being put into new subsurface utilities and infrastructure.
Right. Wonderful. I'm just going to remind folks that are on the call, if there's a question that you would like prioritized, have a look through them right now, upvote them so that I can get them to the team to answer. This is a frequent one that we get as well. Will there be protected multi-use bicycle lanes along the LRT?
So not everywhere. Again, another dollar in the jar. We're a narrow corridor. In some cases, 17 meters between building face to building face, and being able to protect for LRT, sidewalks, and traffic, even if it's just for accesses to adjacent properties, that eats up that 17 meters real quick. So not everywhere. However, there are opportunities in some of the areas to connect with the city's overall cycling network. So we are working with the city in terms of opportunities, for example, on Main Street West and what that would look like in terms of cycling facilities. Same thing with on Dundurn. So that's something that we're intimately in discussions with the city in terms of, because again, cycling facilities are part of an overall network. And what opportunities do we have as part of the LRT project to help create those connections and contribute to that overall network? I would encourage those to take a look at our conceptual design, which has been posted on our website. It, at a high level, will show where some of those cycling facilities are currently planned, and our thinking around that will continue to evolve as we get in through our detailed design phases.
Right. So we've got another question coming in. How will procurement of supplies and labor align with current focus on Buy Canada, Buy Local?
So generally speaking, it's something that we promote both as an organization and as a government. And as I've said, this project is about community and economic development and jobs, and spurring economic growth is part and parcel of what we're doing with this project. There are multiple different policies at the government and organizational level that we utilize. We also have some strategies through what we refer to as our community benefits program in terms of how we utilize local labor and resources. I can't get into all of the details here today, but it's definitely something top of mind at all levels of the project, something that we're committed to. And in terms of what those details look like, that will be something that evolves again through conversations as we move forward. And happy to, as we move forward, provide more information on some of our strategies and policies we utilize to address that.
Perfect. So I think we've got about time for one more question. We've got Hayden's here. Will there be a mini transit hub with bus laybys at the Dundurn LRT station? This is the closest station from Highway 403 and should provide convenient transfers between GO buses, HSR, and the LRT. Maybe Danielle, you can take that and then we can move that over to Nick.
Sure. Not anything currently planned, I would say, in terms of it being a hub, both from the HSR network perspective as well as GO Transit, whether it's bus or rail even, because the GO rail corridor is nearby that area as well. There's no intention to make it a hub. And I can pass it over to Nick in terms of what service will be there. And I know you talked, Nick, around the hubs throughout the city and maybe a bit how those hubs were kind of decided and why Dundurn is maybe not necessarily one of those.
Sure. So just to start off with, what we will have in service at Dundurn are 2 bus routes. One that heads out and provides local service towards McMaster, and then one that will essentially be our new to Barton route. So it does have local connections, but it isn't seen as a major kind of citywide hub. The one that kind of fits that billing in this area for us is at McMaster. We have more routes planned at that connection and are still working through the details for that hub.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, we're at 7:55, folks, so we are at the limit for our questions today. I can see that we still have some good questions in the chat. What I would suggest for folks to do is that they could submit them to Hamilton at Metrolinx.com if you'd still like that, and then our team can take those and address some of them. I just wanted to, maybe we can go to the next slide. I just wanted to let you know that this was a really great virtual open house. I really appreciate everyone who came on, asked questions. They were very thoughtful. I hope they gave you the information that you were looking for, that you feel informed now, and that, as Kelly mentioned in her comments regarding staying in touch with us, you can stay connected. If there's anything else you're interested in getting to know, we will do our best to respond to you. You can follow us on social. There's our phone number there. You can always email us. That's myself and members of my team who will be responding to you. And you can always sign up for our newsletter using the QR code there, or you can go onto our website as well, the Hamilton LRT. So before we close, I just wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone for joining us today. I also wanted to thank all our panelists and friend Danielle for only taking 1 glass of water during this question break. That was quite remarkable. So thank you again for all your thoughtful response. For the folks at the city joining us, as well as Nick from HSR, that was great to have you with us today. Again, if you want to stay connected with us, feel free to follow us on social media. If you've got anything else, feel free to email us at our website. We will be out in the community this summer. So stop by the tent, have a chat with us. We're happy to answer the questions to the best of our abilities. There will be more virtual open houses like this as the project progresses. So keep your eyes open. You'll probably see them posted. And just as a quick reminder to all of you who are still with us today, we will be emailing out a notice once the recording is live on our website, as well as a presentation, so that you can share it with your friends, you can watch it again. And again, thank you for everything that you have done to contribute for this meeting today. Until next time, folks, have a wonderful evening. Enjoy some coolness if you can, at least find somewhere comfortable to be. And we really thank you for joining us tonight.